During the 19th century, with industrial expansion occurring around the Erie Canal, entrepreneurs in central New York got to work, building and investing in railroads and iron mills, industries that saw a boom after the Civil War. Even my hometown of Skaneateles, New York, has history in these industries. Charting the generation of mills in my hometown is tricky. This is because the names, locations, and ownership of mills changed often. At times, the mills boasted new addresses, despite never moving. As Skaneateles resident and historian Kim Winship quips, this is just inconvenient for modern historians. Luckily, we do know something about the shape of railroad and iron businesses in Skaneateles, the expansion of which mirrors the growth in the rest of the U.S. The town's first iron mill was incorporated in 1866, a need for which was likely predicated on the explosion in railroad mileage in the decade following the Civil War. Skaneateles also had its own railroad. The Shortline Railroad, built in 1836, had fallen into disuse and disrepair and bankruptcy by 1850. But in 1866, the same year as the iron mill was incorporated, $100,000 was raised to bring it back into service. The increase in demand is explained by an increase in plants established along the Erie Canal and by the rise in tourism. Skaneateles became a destination spot for many wealthy and influential people of New York State at this time, a trend that continues today. I've heard it dubbed the Hamptons of the Finger Lakes. A notable investor in the Skaneateles iron mill was Edward B. Coe, whose business dealings and family roots in the area garnered him popularity and a seat as town supervisor. Though his family had roots in Skaneateles, Coe had his work cut out for him to establish himself as a resident, because in 1857 he was declared legally dead. It seems that before Coe became an investor, he traveled the globe extensively and went missing for 10 years, prompting a court to declare him, quote, judicially dead, end quote. The declaration of death was motivated by the need to transfer ownership of property that Coe had inherited previously, a building in Buffalo that eventually transferred to his sister after his paper death in 1861. Coe suddenly reappeared in Skaneateles and went to court to assert his aliveness. With William H. Seward as his lawyer, who served as Secretary of State and Senator and Governor of New York, the judge agreed to bring Coe back to life, legally speaking, and he reclaimed his inheritance, likely giving him the financial leverage with which to invest in the iron mill. But just 5 years after the mill's incorporation, changing financial trends impacted the solvency of the mill. On the precipice of the Panic of 1873, Coe and his partner investors offered bonds in an effort to raise $150,000. With no takers, a desperate Coe forged the names of two of his partner investors on commercial paper, a form of unsecured short-term debt typically used by corporations to shore up cash flow needed to make payroll, keep inventory in stock, and pay vendors. Coe's forgeries were estimated in the amount of $18,000, roughly $430,000 in today's currency. Coe was arrested. He left town in disgrace. What was left of his financial holdings were dissolved. All the other iron mill investors left Skaneateles out of shame or died shortly after the bankruptcy. Tragically, Coe fled Skaneateles and took his own life in 1883. The mill's inability to generate additional funding and Coe's subsequent desperation coincided with major banking changes occurring at the same time the mill needed more investment. Quoting from the Library of Congress, banks raised millions of dollars through selling bonds to finance construction. Speculators bet on the railroad, gambling on the fact that settlement and opportunities to make money would follow behind the completed railway. However, construction expenses ballooned and outpaced financing. Efforts to raise more funding failed. When they could no longer pay the bills, many banking houses folded. Though historical accounts note that Coe was arrested for forgeries, several legal database searches did not reveal evidence of a court case. There are a couple potential explanations for this. One, it could be that this researcher just hasn't found the documentation yet. 2, charges were never officially filed because of Coe's status or lack of sufficient evidence. 3, the iron mill's bankruptcy filing in 1873 negated the possibility of recovering funds. 4, it's possible that although the forgeries were committed, the funds weren't actually made available to Coe and the organization. 5, there may have been bigger fish to fry. Bigger economic recovery strategies took priority over Coe's desperate forgery attempt. And 6, perhaps law enforcement used Coe's previous paper death to absolve him of responsibility. Probably not. But as Seward noted during Coe's previous case, a paper death would allow Coe to commit any crime without penalty. Further research into the circumstances surrounding the arrest and a deep dive into the mill's financials to find out if they received money from this commercial paper is needed to determine how the forgery charge fits into the larger socioeconomic picture. There's also some discrepancy in the historical literature regarding how Coe spent his years away from New York. One account puts him sailing to South Africa in 1849 and states he was sold into slavery. Another historical depiction, published by Edmund Leslie, romanticizes Coe's globetrotting, putting him in South Africa, in China, and hunting elephants and zebras. These conflicting accounts obscure Coe's larger financial picture. Further research may delve into what documentation might exist to find Coe's activities during his missing years. That may prove difficult, but Leslie alludes to time spent, quote, employed in the Kaffir War in South Africa. Employed doing what? How did he pay his way to South Africa and then to China? Did Coe return to Skaneateles with money of his own, or some other assets that helped him invest in the mill? A more thorough examination of Coe's and his family's financial holdings might shed more light on Coe's legacy in 19th century Skaneateles.